When you think about index funds or ETFs, and you think about the average Joe investor, the gold standard has to be Vanguard. What started as just one index fund in the beginning has grown to quite a few different opportunities. 267 different mutual funds and 84 different exchange-traded funds. I noticed that Vanguard offers 45 different indexed ETFs. International stocks, dividend stocks, small cap, mid cap, you name it. So naturally, I created a spreadsheet and I backtested every single one of the 45 different stock ETFs that Vanguard offers. Let's dive into the results. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Average Joe Investor channel. So like I mentioned, 45 different ETFs. Of the 45, we've got 12 that are international ETFs. Then large cap, we have a total of 17 ETFs. Mid cap, we have 7 ETFs, and then small cap, we have 9 ETFs. And these include very popular ETFs, including VOO, the S&P 500 ETF right here, VTI, the total stock market ETF right here. Before we jump into the actual results and look at the graphs, let me just go over the assumptions that I made and the underlying data that supports these results. Thankfully, Vanguard has a long history, and every single one of these 45 different ETFs had at least 5 years of data, which was great. So we looked at 2 separate timeframes. The first is the previous year, 2023, from January to December. We also looked at the time period January 2019 through December 2023, or the previous 5 years. In each of these timeframes, we assumed an initial investment, a lump sum investment of $10,000 at the beginning of the period. We did not make any additional contributions during that time frame, and we reinvested any and all dividends earned. And you can see along the bottom here the different ETFs and all of the data here. Every single one of them has this time frame here for the 5 years right here and the 1 year right here. If you're the kind of person that likes to jump into the underlying data, this spreadsheet, along with all the other spreadsheets, are available to you if you join the Average Joe Investor Patreon community. If you want to learn more about all the benefits you get by joining, check out the link down in the description below. So first off, let's jump into the 1 year historical results for 2023. The top 5 ETFs for the previous year based on total portfolio balance, reinvesting all dividends for the previous year, were number 1, MGK, the Mega Cap Growth ETF, VUG, the Growth ETF, the Russell 1000 Growth ETF, VONG, the S&P 500 Growth ETF, VOOG, and then lastly, the ESG US Stock ETF, ESGV. The top 3 by far, though, were MGK, VUG, and VONG. Started with 10,000, ended with 14,300, 14,700, and $15,200. All of these happen to be large cap ETFs, and the top 4 are large cap growth ETFs. The worst 5 ETFs during this time frame, the previous 1 year, were number 1, Global ex-US Real Estate ETF, VNQI, was only 10,560. Then we had the High Dividend Yield ETF, VYM, second worst among all Vanguard ETFs, 10,675. Third was VWO, which is an FTSE Emerging Markets ETF, that was at 10,810. Then fourth, the Mega Cap Value ETF, MGV, worth only 10,943. And then fifth, the Vanguard Value ETF, VTV, worth 10,951. Now, one thing I want to point out, though, is over the previous year, every single one of these ETFs started with $10,000. Every single one of them ended with more than $10,000. So let's not lose perspective here. Let me repeat myself, every single one of the Vanguard Index ETFs for the previous year was positive. Here's a look at the graphed data for every single one of the 45 ETFs. You can see that there was definite separation here in the top 3. In green, which was MGK, second, which was VUG in pink, and then third in purple, which is VONG. And we can see that the underlying performer here in red was the worst performer for the majority of the year as well, VNQI. But for the most part, a lot of them were very similar. And a lot of these are very similar in the sense that you've got like the large cap growth, large cap value, and then just the large cap, which is a blend of both. So that's what the 1 year return is for 2023. Let's jump to the 5 year results. All right, so the top 5 ETFs for the 5 year period, 2019 to 2023. Top one was the exact same. Mega Cap Growth ETF, MGK, worth $25,062. Started with $10,000 in the beginning of the 5 year period. And in second place, we had the Russell 1000 Growth ETF, VONG. In third, we had the Vanguard Growth ETF, VUG, worth $24,023. In fourth, the Vanguard S&P 500 Growth ETF, VOOG, worth $21,136, and fifth, the Mega Cap ETF MGC, worth $21,093. In a close sixth place, we had the ESG US Stock ETF ESGV, worth $21,056. Now, in the 5-year period, there was, in fact, one ETF here that did underperform by quite a bit. And it was the only Vanguard ETF in this 5-year period to actually lose money. That is the Global X-US Real Estate ETF VNQI, worth $9,923 when it started with $10,000 after 5 years. Second worst was VWO, the Emerging Markets ETF, worth only $12,570. Third worst, the FTSE Pacific ETF VPL, worth $13,662. Fourth worst, FTSE All World X-US Small Cap ETF VSS, worth $13,915. And then the fifth worst here was the ESG International Stock ETF VSGX, worth $14,040.66. All of these, except for one, still made money. What's also interesting, if you look at both the 1-year results and the 5-year results right next to each other, that the top performers year over year for each different section were about the same, with the only difference being a minor flip-flop here in 5th place between MGC and ESGV in the 5-year period. If you look though at the bottom here, the worst performer in both periods was in fact VNQI. Then you also had here in third worst here the same VWO right here. And in general, all of the underperforming ones over 5 years were also lower performing in 2023. Here's a graph of the 5-year total return for all of these Vanguard ETFs, and this is a little bit more muddy, but it's fascinating how they all seem to move together, and it probably has to do with the fact that they are index ETFs. By far, the top 3 were overperforming by quite a bit. We've got in green VUG, and in the darker orange here, right here, VONG, and the peach color here, MGK. By far the worst performing, and it stands out quite a bit here below all of the other ETFs, is that VNQI ETF right here. But you can see the majority of them move together quite a bit throughout this 5-year period. Now let's break this down into a few different segments, because you might be thinking to yourself, well, hey, I only go to Vanguard for one thing, which is maybe an international ETF, or maybe just a large cap, or you just want to see of all of those, how did those individual segments perform? Let's break those down. First off, let's take a look at just the international ETFs. There were in fact 12 of them, and by far the top performer over the previous 5 years was right here, the Total World Stock ETF, VT, worth $17,518. And the Total World Stock ETF also was the top performer over the previous year as well. So if you're looking for international, you're looking for somewhat of a historical review of performance, and you're saying, I want to own an international ETF, and I want to go with Vanguard, then the one that's performed the best over the previous year and 5 years is, in fact, VT. But just be aware of the fact that past performance has no impact on future results. Could end up being that this ETF underperforms in the future. We just don't know. Next up, let's take a look at large cap only, okay? Large cap right here. And we've got a total of, how many here? Is it 12, 11, 17, 17 large cap ETFs. And these were by far the largest performers over the entire group as well. Top performing ones here were the ones I mentioned: MGK, VONG, VUG, VOOG, and MGC. And it just so happens that the 3 worst performers in 2023 all happen to be large cap: VYM, VTV, and MGV. Let's take a look now at mid cap. There were a total of, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mid cap ETFs. And if you're looking for mid-cap here, the best result here was by far the Mid-Cap Growth ETF, VOT, over the previous 5 years. And in 2023, the top performer was VXF, the Extended Markets ETF, which just outperformed VOT. And then let's look at small cap here. There were a total of 9 different small cap ETFs. The top performer for small cap was just by a little bit here, VBR, the Small Cap Value ETF, which slightly outperformed the small cap ETF VB over the previous 5 years. If we look at just 2023 though, in this case though, small cap growth outperformed VBK at 12,252 compared to second place, the Russell 2000 growth ETF VTWG. Lastly, let's take a look at the 4 Vanguard dividend ETFs. There are 4 of them in total: VIG, VYMI, VIGI, and VYM, 2 of those being international dividend ETFs. Top result for the previous 5 years among these 4 was by far VIG, worth $19,241. And then if you look at just the most recent year, the top result was the International High Dividend Yield ETF, VYMI, followed by the other international at $11,555, then VIG, then VYM. So takeaways here. So if you're looking for just one ETF to own long-term, I still think regardless of these results, you can't go wrong with either VOO or VTI because you get the total market. And you could also combine VTI, which is the total stock market, with the total world ETF as well to get a really balanced approach. If you're looking for individual segments of the market, you can certainly pick and choose here based on historical results. Just remember that past performance does not lead to future results. Hopefully you found some value out of this video, guys. Make sure to leave your 2 cents down in the comments below. It's my goal to respond to as many comments as possible on the day I post a new video. That's all I got for you guys. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for watching.